I can't remember how, when, or where I met Leah. It was a long time ago, and my memory isn't the best. I think I met her first in a big old city near the Rhine in Germany. She told me that she came from an ancient family, but I never knew the name of the woman, who was my friend, my partner in my studies, and finally my wife. Why didn't I ever discover her family name? Maybe because she didn't want me to find out. But I don't remember much. But I do remember that Leah was tall and slim. She became very thin later on. How can I describe her quiet, aristocratic movements, or the strange softness of her footsteps? When she came into my office, I only knew she was there when I heard her voice, or when she put her white hand on my shoulder. She had a beautiful face, but it wasn't a classical kind of beauty. There was something strange about it. I have often tried to understand. Was it her pure white skin, or her thick black hair? I looked at her long, delicate nose many times. It was perfect. I looked at her sweet mouth. How soft and red it was. And when she smiled, her teeth were white. Then I looked into her eyes. They were much bigger than normal eyes. Sometimes when she was excited, they looked like a deer's eyes. They were black with long black eyelashes and black eyebrows. But as I looked into them, I realized that they had a strange expression. I thought about it for many hours, sometimes all night. I was so curious about the expression in Lee's eyes. I thought I almost had the answer, but then it was gone. Leah was very determined. She was always calm and quiet, but her determination showed in her eyes. It shone like a terrible energy, and sometimes it frightened me. Leah was very clever. She was excellent at Latin and Greek, and she knew many other languages perfectly. She never made a mistake. She was also a student of science and mathematics. When we were first married, I often asked her for help with my studies, and we worked together. But after she died, I was alone without her. I felt like a child in the dark. When she first became ill, she didn't come to help me as often as before. She lost weight, and her skin became pale and transparent. When I saw that she was dying, I felt desperate. Leah resisted death with all her energy to live. She was determined. I watched in agony as she fought for life. I knew she loved me, but I only understood how much she loved me now. When she knew she was dying, she held my hands and said that she was devoted to me. I can't talk about it now, but I'll say this. Her love for me was part of her determination to live. The night she died, she suddenly got out of bed and cried, "Oh God, must I die? Must I lose my fight with death? No, I can't die like this." But my dear Leah died. I was so sad. I couldn't stay in the old city by the river for a few months. I traveled. Around that time, I bought an old abbey in a remote part of England. This gloomy, melancholy place reflected my feelings of solitude, but I brightened it up with vibrant curtains, cozy carpets, and beautiful ornaments. I thought that the lively colors would lift my spirits, but sadly they didn't. I started drinking too much, but I don't want to dwell on that period of my life. I'll just say that one day, I married the lovely Lady Rowena Trevanion of Train. My new wife had blonde hair and blue eyes. She was very different from my first wife, but I just couldn't forget Leah. I took Lady Rowena back to a room high up in the tower of the abbey, where we lived for the first month of our marriage. The room was very large with an enormous window made of glass from Venice. The ceiling was high like a church, and in the center, there was a big gold chandelier. There were sofas from the East and an Indian bed. On the walls, there were long tapestries like carpets with the designs were made of gold, and the tapestries moved every time the wind blew. My wife was afraid of me, because I was often sad and depressed. She didn't love me much and stayed away from me, but I was okay with that. I always thought about Leah, my beautiful Leah, who was dead in the tomb. Sometimes in my dreams, I called to her in the night. I imagined that perhaps my love for her could bring her back to me. At the beginning of the second month, Lady Rowena became ill. She didn't sleep very well, and she told me she could hear sounds and movements in the tower. "You have a fever," I said. "You're imagining things." She got better, but then she went back to bed with a second illness worse than the first. The doctors could not understand it. Again, Rowena began to hear little sounds and movements in the bedroom, and they frightened her. One night at the end of September, she woke up suddenly. I was sitting on a sofa by her bed. She whispered to me that she could hear sounds and see movements. Her thin face was framed with a frightened expression, but I saw and heard nothing. "It's the wind," I explained gently. "You can see the tapestry moving in the wind," but her face was white with fear, and she nearly fainted. I remembered that there was some wine on the table on the other side of the room, as I walked under the light of the chandelier. Something strange happened. I felt something invisible pass me by, and on the carpet, I saw a shadow. It was almost the shadow of a shadow. I decided to keep my mouth shut and not tell Rowena anything. I poured her a glass of wine and gave it to her. Then I sat on the sofa and watched her. After some moments, I heard very quiet footsteps on the carpet coming towards the bed. A second later, as Rowena was about to drink the wine, I saw, or perhaps I dreamed that I saw, 3 or 4 large drops of a bright red liquid fall into the glass. Rowena did not see it. She drank the wine, and I said nothing because I thought it was after this. I was sure it was just my imagination. But Rowena's health got much worse, and on the 3rd night she died. Her servants prepared her for the tomb and covered her with a sheet. The next night, I sat alone with her body in the bedroom. Strange forms and shadows moved around me, and I looked nervously into the dark corners at the moving tapestries. I felt frightened, but then I looked at the carpet under the chandelier. There was no shadow there, and I felt better when I looked at Rowena. On the bed, sad memories of Leah, the only woman I ever loved, came back to me. It was perhaps around midnight when I heard a sound. It was quiet but clear, and it woke me from my dreams. I thought it came from the bed, and I listened in terror, but I did not hear it again. I looked carefully at Rowena for any sign of life. She wasn't moving, but I continued to look at her. Minutes passed, and then I noticed a little color in Rowena's face. My heart stopped in horror. I couldn't move when I realized Rowena wasn't dead. I tried to revive her, but her cheeks soon lost their color. Her face looked like marble again, and her lips were thin with the horrible expression of death. When her body was cold and rigid, I fell onto the sofa and dreamed about Leah. An hour later, I heard the same sound as before. I listened, and sure enough, There it was again, a sigh from the bed. I ran over and saw clearly that her lips were trembling. Then they opened, showing her bright, beautiful teeth. I thought I was going mad. There was a pink color on her cheeks and neck. Her body was getting warm again, and her heart was beating a little. Oh, thank heavens, Lady Rowena was alive. I did everything I could to revive her. Then suddenly her color disappeared, her heart stopped, and her body became cold and rigid. I sat down and began to think about Leah again. Then for the third time there was a sound from the bed. Why must I describe the horrors of that night again? I tried to revive Rowena, and then a time. Each time she seemed to fight with an invisible force, and each time her body changed. I cannot say how, but she looked different. It was nearly dawn when she moved again. I was sitting on the sofa exhausted, but Rowena's body moved with more energy than before. Her color returned, and her eyes were open. She looked alive. Then she suddenly got out of bed and walked slowly to the center of the room, like she was walking in her sleep. I was so tired, but I didn't even tremble or move. I was as cold and still as stone. I was paralyzed by what I saw. My head was filled with wild thoughts. Was Rowena really alive? Could I really see her blonde hair and blue eyes? Why wasn't I certain? I couldn't see her mouth very well, but her cheeks were like pink roses. Were they Rowena's cheeks? She was taller than before. Was she still smaller than me? I was filled with a kind of madness. I ran to her, but she moved away. Then I saw her long hair moving in the wind. It was blacker than the black of midnight. Now slowly her eyes opened. I couldn't help but shout, "Oh, my dear, sweet Leah! These are the black eyes of my lost love." The voiceover in this video is given by English Learning Hub. Please don't copy or re-upload. We'll take further action as soon as we notice. Thanks for your understanding.